Hi, my name is Vincent Piazza. I'm a Social Security disability lawyer from Baltimore, Maryland. And today what I'd like to do is discuss with you exactly how Social Security decides disability cases. They give it a fancy term. They call it sequential evaluation. Sequential evaluation is just a 5-part legal analysis, and I'm going to walk through each one of those steps in a moment. First, what I'd like to do is start off with the definition of disability. Disability is an inability to engage in any substantial gainful activity by reason of any medically determinable physical or mental impairment, which can be expected to result in death, or which has lasted or can be expected to last for a continuous period of not less than 12 months. That's a lot of words. In essence, does someone have a physical or mental impairment that prevents them from working? And what Social Security will look at is their age, their education, and their past relevant work. So let's take a look at the 5 steps. Is someone engaging in substantial gainful activity? They aren't. Do they have a severe impairment? They do. Does that severe impairment meet or equal a medical listing? If it doesn't, can the individual return to past relevant work? And if they can't, is there other work in the national economy they can perform? Let's go through this step by step. Step 1 is substantial gainful activity. Is someone working and making in excess of $1,180 per month? They are, and by definition, they've proved that physical or mental impairment is not so significant that it prevents them from working. They are working at an SGA level. Their case must be denied. Now, there are several exceptions to that, like unsuccessful work attempts, self-employment, income, and even sheltered work. But all those exceptions will be discussed in upcoming videos. Assuming someone is not working at an SGA or substantial gainful activity level, the second question is whether or not they have a severe impairment. Well, severe impairment is any impairment which basically interferes with basic work-related activities. From a physical perspective, the ability to sit, stand, or lift. From a mental health perspective, the ability to concentrate or interact with people. Now, severe impairment must meet the durational requirement, and that it must be expected to last at least 12 months. Assuming the individual does have a severe impairment and it does meet the durational requirement, the adjudicator would then proceed to step 3, a sequential evaluation. Step 3 of sequential evaluation is whether or not someone actually meets or equals the severity of a listing. And if they do, then there's an absolute presumption of disability once that physical or mental criteria has been established. Now, this is a screening device for Social Security, basically to kind of skim off the top the most significant or the most egregious kind of physical or mental impairments. Now, there are specific medical criteria in each of the 14 listings recognized by the Commissioner, and again, that criteria will be addressed in future videos. But as an example, if an individual is a double amputee, they would meet an absolute presumption of disability by meeting a listing. Someone whose visual acuity is greater than 2200 in both eyes after correction would meet an absolute presumption of disability by meeting a listing. And last but not least, if an individual had full-blown AIDS with various infections kicking in, that individual would meet the medical criteria and would be entitled to a presumption of disability based on meeting the listings. Now, assuming an individual doesn't meet or equal the listing, Social Security will then proceed to step 4, a sequential evaluation, which is whether or not that individual can return to past relevant work. Now, past relevant work is any work that was done at a substantial gainful activity level within the last 15 years. But before you can actually complete the step 4 analysis, Social Security has to determine what the person's physical or mental residual functional capacity is. Now again, that's kind of a fancy-dancy kind of phrase. What residual functional capacity is what someone can do despite their impairment. So from a physical perspective, how long can they sit? How long can they stand? How much can they lift and carry? From a mental health perspective, how well can they understand, remember, and carry out instructions? How well can they respond to supervision and coworkers? Now, to complete the step 4 analysis, Social Security has to compare the claimant's physical and mental residual functional capacity against the actual physical and mental requirements of past work. Based on that comparison, then Social Security can make the determination whether or not someone can return to past relevant work. If they can, then the claim must be denied. If they can't return to past relevant work, then Social Security must proceed to step 5, a sequential evaluation, which is whether or not they can perform other work. Now, the analysis in terms of whether or not someone can return to other work really depends on whether or not the client has purely exertional limitations, sitting, standing, and lifting, in which case then Social Security will use what are called the medical vocational guidelines or grids to dictate the outcome of the case. For instance, if we have a 55-year-old construction worker, he's limited to a sedentary exertion, he would be deemed disabled, whereas a 35-year-old construction worker who's also limited to a sedentary exertion would not be. And that's based on the medical vocational guidelines, which would dictate the outcome in that case. However, if the person has both exertional and non-exertional limitations, for instance, they have postural limitations, they have environmental limitations, they have mental health limitations, then the administrative law judge must obtain testimony from a vocational expert. So let's recap. Sequential evaluation, just a fancy term for how Social Security walks through a 5-part legal analysis in every disability claim. Is someone engaging in substantial gainful activity? If they are, the claim must be denied. If not, then you proceed to step 2. Do they have a severe physical or mental impairment? If they do, does that impairment actually meet or equal the medical criteria for an absolute presumption of disability at step 3? If not, can they return to past relevant work? If they cannot, is there other work in the national economy those individuals can perform? That's sequential evaluation in a nutshell. Thank you for your time and attention.